After 1,189 different resumes and applications submitted to a wide variety of occupational opportunities available, I have finally been able to acquire employment as a unvaccinated, mask-exempt homeless man living out of his truck. This was obviously a very difficult task to complete, and I was only able to do so by implementing what I deem to be the last resort strategy. And I refer to it as such because it requires a massive amount of public humiliation to be able to go through and endure while executing this strategy, but it does have a 100% success rate, with the only main variable being how much time and effort you're willing to put into it. Now, I do want to preface this video by stating that I've been looking for work ever since May of 2020, like well over 2 years. And I've been going absolutely everywhere to try and do so. I'm talking Walmart, grocery stores, those little stores in the malls, even the little kiosks, liquor stores, convenience stores, just the most basic entry-level minimum wage positions that a blind, deaf, and dumb orangutan could acquire with ease. I've been going everywhere and been failing miserably ever since. Now, I do want to rephrase that a little bit. I've been able to acquire employment at a number of these different establishments, but it was always retracted within 24 hours after me acquiring it. Now, let me go into a little bit of detail on that. I mean, I would put on a suit, a dress shirt, open collar, have one button undone, no tie, a little bit of casual with the professional, and just bring in some resumes, talk to the managers that were working at the time, and often have like an hour, 2 hour long conversations with these managers, develop some very good rapport, and be hired on the spot, been given the paperwork, and instructed to come back on the following Monday for my first day. And every time that happened, I would get a phone call within 24 hours from the same manager that hired me, stating that they spoke with the upper echelons management and they were unable to go through with the hiring process, never giving any sort of specific detail, and it was extremely frustrating. Now, this happened numerous times. It wasn't just like a one-off thing. So after a while, I tried to, figure out what was going on. Like, how come this was happening? So I took a third-party empathetic viewpoint and tried to, think of, if I was a manager or if I was the owner of a store or something like that, what would I do if I just hired somebody? One of the first things I would do is I would check out who they were online, check out who you're working with and go through some social media platforms, etc. And when you do that with my name, Shad Budge, what are you going to find? Well, you're going to find, first and foremost, human rights advocate, really cares about fundamental civil liberties, bodily autonomy, stuff like that, unvaccinated, unwilling to get vaccinated, whether it's gene therapy or otherwise, medical exemption from face coverings, and etc. So these could be liabilities for certain employers, certain prospective employers. And so I had a decision to make at that point. I contemplated deleting absolutely everything on my social media that I put on there over the last few years and completely suppressing and censoring myself. But that's not something that I wanted to do. I figured that I would not be able to live with myself doing that and really just suppressing the principles of who I am as a person. So I figured I would continue on trying to acquire employment with somebody that respected those, human rights principles and bodily autonomy and otherwise. So I continued on and tried to acquire employment with somebody that was, what I deemed to be, a decent human being. So one day when I was coming out of a grocery store, and I do go to a grocery store on a daily basis. I only get about $500 a month from welfare, and and after insurance and my phone bill and my gym membership, I'm looking at I only have $8 or $9 a day that I can spend on food and beverage, right? So I have to be very frugal with how I do that, and for me to do that successfully, I have to just get food on a daily basis. So when I was coming out of the grocery store one day, I saw a man who was in very tough times and was begging for food on a cardboard sign outside of a local grocery store. And I don't see these people often, maybe once a month, but every time I do, I feel like I should help them. I've always been that way. I don't always help them, but maybe 50, 60% of the time, I try and give them something. You know, whatever I have, just a piece of something. Maybe it's a couple granola bars, a few slices of bread, you know, or a bottle of water. Whatever I'm working with, I try and just kind of divvy up a little bit of something. Give them some sort of sustenance, which is much better than nothing, right? Like, they have to be in pretty dire straits to be begging for food outside of a grocery store, and in very rough condition at that, right? So in a much worse position than I am, which is rough to say the least. So I thought to myself, if I was willing to help these people who are, you know, begging for food with a cardboard sign outside of a grocery store, there is a high probability that other people are willing to help them out as well, right? It's only logical. So if I was able to do the same kind of strategy, but instead of beg for food, beg for work, beg for employment with my own sign, that could generate some success, right? So I went to a dollar store, got a white poster board with a oversized Sharpie pen for like a couple of bucks, and created my own sign. It said homeless, the very top, need work, those two words, and at the very bottom of the sign, I put unvaxxed, you know, just to make sure that any prospective employers would be well aware that I was unwilling to subject myself to that kind of medical intervention, right? And I also went to the public library. I printed off like 20, 30 different resumes. And then I put on a suit, dress shirt, most, you know, professional kind of look that I could. And I took the sign, the resumes, the suit, and I stood outside of very busy intersections, as well as grocery stores and other kind of, you know, prospective employment places that I thought would be good to stand in front of, right? Anywhere that generated a lot of eyes, a lot of visual traffic, right? So eventually, I should say that I had a lot of very interesting conversations with a lot of freedom-oriented people that would just come up to me and strike up conversations, etc. And I dished out a ton of resumes over the course of a few weeks, and I was doing this about twice a week. Over a few weeks, until I was finally able to acquire employment outside of the local superstore. And I was approached by a lady who was very kind, and I advised her that I was already rejected from Superstore, and she told me that she knew all the management in there and that she could get me a job. And it was very kind of her to do so. I gave her a resume. And then I was able to subsequently follow up with an interview with one of the managers, and I was able to get hired on with Superstore. This was very, very big, and it's been a couple of weeks since, and I have not been terminated, so it looks like things are all good. Now, I will stress that, you know, this isn't a luxurious or lucrative position, you know, it's just minimum wage, but at the same time, it is a hell of a lot better than the, you know, $500 a month welfare that I was restricted to prior. So I'm very happy to try and climb my way out of the poverty that I'm currently in. And you know, this strategy is, you know, it should be stated, this strategy is incredibly difficult to go through, psychologically speaking. It is, you know, it is very embarrassing from a public point of view. You know, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's just, you know, be advised, anybody that's doing it, it's just tough to go through, right? So, I mean, you can develop your own kind of sign, put whatever you want on there, but even if you just have need work, you know, in 2 words with a sign out front, if you stand outside of somewhere long enough, somebody's going to come up to you and say, hey, you know, I'm looking for employees at here and here or whatever, and it will work. It has a 100% success rate. The only variable, like I said, is just time and effort you want to put into doing it. So although it is not the most ideal way to acquire employment, it did work for me. And if you know anybody who's really struggling like I was in trying to acquire employment, send them this video and see if they're maybe interested in kind of implementing this kind of strategy to really solving that issue. So that's it for this video. I'll leave you with my my customary end quote, which is, tyranny does not come from tyrants, tyranny comes from mass compliance. So stay safe out there, and peace out to everybody. Thank you.